everybody, what's up? My name's Thomas. This is How to Story. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to write a short story from beginning to end. We're going to start off with the idea for it. We're going to do brainstorming and character development and all that, all the planning stuff, the actual writing of the story, and then I'll probably show you guys different ways you can publish the story once you're done writing it. I'm going to show you the general steps. That way you can take those steps and write your own story. And hopefully by the end of it you'll have a pretty decent story that you can show to people and not feel totally embarrassed. And it definitely won't sound like the fan fiction you wrote when you were 12 years old. So let's go over to the computer and we'll get started. So first things first, how are you going to set up your workstation? You don't need a computer, you know. I have this Word document open up right here where I'm going to start writing my outlines and stuff. If you don't have a computer, if you're like 10 years old and your parents haven't bought you one yet, or if your computer's slow, if you have a slow laptop or whatever, you can easily do all this on an actual notebook, on an actual piece of paper. And in fact, some people think better that way. So if you're one of those people, you know, feel free. This is again, this is a general guideline. This is not something that you have to follow word for word, but you do want to make sure that you have no distractions around you. Me right now, I'm kind of surrounded. I got the green screen. I have some sound panels right here because I'm recording. But generally, you just want to make sure that you're going to be free of distractions for the entire duration of your writing session. So the first thing we want to start with is the idea. Most of the time when inspiration strikes you for a story, it's because you have that one central idea that you want to expand on and write about. And so there's actually a subreddit that I love. It's called R Writing Prompts. Let me pull it up real quick. So I like to come to this subreddit right here for inspiration sometimes. It's a great place to, you know, get ideas because people are writing all these different crazy writing prompts that you can go off of, and you can get some great ideas from there. So I'm going to go ahead and look through our writing prompts and try to figure out, try to find one that inspires me that I can write with. You can easily do this and just boom, start getting to writing. Some of them are really straightforward like that, but sometimes you have your own inspiration in your mind and it's a great idea to develop. So this is just for exercise purposes. If you have your own idea, you can go with that. If you don't have your own idea, this is a great way to get inspiration. Once you start getting your creative juices flowing and you do this like once a week, put aside a few hours, write a short story, your own ideas will start coming to you. You'll become more creative the more creative you are. So let's start with the prompt, and I'm just going to go ahead and look for one right here real quick. Okay, guys, so I've been searching for like half an hour generally. I ended up finding this writing prompt right here. The curse can only be broken by a willing kiss, not from your true love, but from your worst enemy. Now, the reason I picked this prompt was because as soon as I read it, I had all these ideas in my head for what I could write. We're going to go ahead and explore this idea real quick. Okay, so once you have your prompt, you want to start thinking about just brainstorming ideas for your project. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bold and underline this. I'm going to put brainstorm. And let's put some bullet points down. So bullet points. Let's go with the first one. This is going to be a medieval setting. Medieval/Renaissance setting. I probably spelled both of those wrong. Yes, I did. So I'm thinking about how a character could be cursed in this scenario. And I like subverting expectations in the stories that I write. So I think the best route to go here is to make it so that, well, let's look at the prompt again. The prompt says, not from your true love, but from your worst enemy. So, has to be a willing kiss. So, if you're the one who's cursed, you can't just walk up to your enemy and kiss them and then the curse is lifted. The enemy has to willingly kiss you. So, I'm thinking, what if we spend the whole story with our protagonist trying to get this kiss from their worst enemy, but in the process of spending time with their worst enemy, trying to convince them to do this, they actually fall in love with each other. And then by the time they receive the kiss, they're no longer their worst enemy. And so the curse is not lifted. I like that idea. So let's put plot twist. Enemy falls in love with protagonist. Protagonist. So now we just have to think how, in our medieval Renaissance realm, how we can construct a plot where that is possible. And obviously we don't want this to be something where the audience goes through the whole story reading it just to end up like disappointed at the end because the protagonist doesn't get what they were looking for the whole time. So rather than making this feel like a defeat, I think it'd be better if maybe the curse was helping the protagonist, but the protagonist just didn't realize it at the time. So what I was thinking was, what if the protagonist is a witch who is cursed by her coven to not be able to use magic anymore for whatever reason? But basically this is a punishment to the witch, and the witch, now not being able to use her magic, has to try to get this other person to kiss them, but now because the witch spends all this time with their worst enemy ends up falling in love with them. They end up falling in love with their worst enemy. When they do the kissy kiss, then it doesn't work. It doesn't end the curse. But through the journey of the story, maybe the protagonist realizes they didn't actually need their magic, and in fact their magic was holding them back. Maybe this witch is a character that uses magic as a crutch, and we want to teach this witch something. We want to use the story to show people that maybe the things that you've been doing, the habits you have, bad habits, need to be reevaluated. You know, evaluating your bad habits and using the people you care about to help you with that. And I think that this story would be a great way to represent that. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So protagonist is a witch who is cursed to lose their magic. We'll figure out genders of the characters later. Honestly, I'm feeling really loosey-goosey with this. This might end up being a same-sex romance just because of the fact that usually your worst enemy is not someone of the opposite sex. And I don't know if that's true or how it works. Basically, once we post this on Wattpad or whatever, nobody's going to know that this is the writing prompt we based it off of. So they're going to be reading the story in their head thinking, oh, these people are worst fucking enemies. They're never going to get along. And maybe through that, they think the protagonist is actually going to end up winning and getting their magic back through some kind of messed up, maniacal, like, mumbo jumbo. I don't know. But we know what's really going on. So the goal of this plot twist, whenever you have a plot twist in your story, the biggest thing you want to make sure of is that your plot twist is going to make sense to the audience. Let's think. What else could we put here? So who is this worst enemy person going to be? Let's figure out their story, the antagonist. Clearly this antagonist has to end up being the protagonist's worst enemy. So what could the protagonist have done to make this person hate them so much? Okay. Let's imagine the antagonist is a princess. Yeah, that's a subversion of expectations. It's not, I don't think very many antagonists are the princess. Maybe these two live with each other, and because they say that, right? That the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. So I think if these people start off the story with a bit of trust in each other and on good terms, and then the protagonist, the witch, does something terrible, maybe because the coven is punishing the witch and the princess and the witch are close, maybe people close to the princess get hurt and the witch is responsible because of whatever she did to upset her coven. Let's go ahead and start thinking of character names then. They gotta sound old-timey, but at the same time still be readable. So let's try Perenna? Perenna, that sounds like a name that could exist. Perenna is the witch, and the princess could be Agatha. Should I change that E to an A? Agatha. Agatha, the princess. Well, if there's a princess, there's obviously a king and a queen, right? King would be... Oh, no. Let's make the king Jeremy, just spelled really weird like that. The king. And reading these, they do... I'm obviously, when you say Agatha and Jeremy, they're not... Maybe Agatha, but like Jeremy definitely doesn't sound like an old name. But when it's spelled like that, I think reading it in your mind, you kind of see how it could appear that way. Like in your mind, it kind of tricks you. Because like when they used to spell time like that and old like this. So like misspelling things like that, or rather using a different spelling of them, I think that could help sell that idea of it being old-timey, even though Jeremy is, I think, a relatively modern name. For the queen, what if, let's start with a K. Kara? I don't like Kara, though. Caramel? No, that's... Oh my god, man, that's stupid. No. Cara Beth? Yeah, that's... I think you could sell that as being a real name, Cara Beth. Yeah. One time I wrote a story a few years ago in my free time where I actually went on, like, Google Translate and tried translating words that I thought represented the characters in, like, these weird, like, languages that I didn't know. And I tried using those words to form something that sounded like it would be a name. And so that's definitely a thing you guys could try if you wanted to. It's definitely a thing you could do, and I think it would definitely work. So there's tons of different ways you guys can come up with names for your characters. But yeah, I like that. Where do they live? Home, kingdom, I guess kingdom. The kingdom will be called, I think I want to do a T. Talisdern? It's kind of clunky. I don't know. This is the stressful part of storytelling here. Well, clearly, here's maybe they go on adventures, because obviously there has to be some like character development, some things they go through together in order to develop the rapport and the trust to fall in love with each other. So at some point they're gonna have to be secluded, just themselves, and they're gonna need to use each other to find their way to their destination. What are some things they could do? I guess they could stop at a small village to get directions and shelter. They'll definitely walk through forests of some kind. I think this story, as a medieval traveling kind of story, would serve itself best with a huge cast of like eclectic characters that can be referenced, and like they all have their own unique personalities. Maybe they hunt for food. Maybe by learning that and using it for their survival on their way back to their town, maybe she's able to realize she doesn't need magic for everything. She's able to live without magic, and that makes it more acceptable when she doesn't get her magic back. Obviously, this is going to be a short story. I don't think it should be more than 50 pages on this Word document. I think once you go past 50 pages, you're writing a novella. I don't want to say novella because it sounds like the Spanish soap operas, but basically like a small version of a novel. I think once you go past 50 pages, you're writing a novella. Once you hit 150 pages, maybe then it could be considered a novel. I don't know if there's official definitions for it, but in my head, that's generally what I accept it to be. I don't want it to be a novella. I want it to be less than 50 pages. Hunting, walk through forest, stop in a small village. I think if we pad out the runtime a little bit with it, we can definitely fill in all those spaces. Let's go ahead and call that there, okay? So now you're going to want to come up with a sentence that will briefly describe your story in the simplest of terms. So by now, after the brainstorm session, you should have everything you need to do this part. You should be able to describe what your story is going to be like in just one sentence. If you don't already have ideas in your head, of like specific scenes or whatever that you're gonna have written. One thing to note about your sentence, it doesn't have to be just one sentence. It could be like 2 or 3, but once you start going past 3, your story might be a little bit too complicated to explain. So now we're gonna start with our outline. Your outline needs to have a few parts. Act 1 is going to be our exposition. Now, I practice the 5-act structure when I write. For me, this is going to be a 5-act story. I just like practicing the 5-act structure. I think it's better than the 3-act structure. I think 5-act structure gives you a lot more wiggle room. I think it helps you organize your ideas better in order to form a more coherent story, and a story that doesn't drag on too long or have parts that seem out of place. The next one is going to be explanation. And most of this channel, I'm going to be mentioning the 5-act structure as a way to tell a story. I think that most good stories are told in a 5-act structure. Let me just write these down and I'll get back to you guys with what these things actually mean. So here's how the 5-act structure works. You have Act 1, exposition, Act 2, explanation, Act 3, exploration, Act 4, the climax, and Act 5, the ending. I use a lot of E's in there just to help it be easier to remember. But basically, here's how it works. Your exposition is going to be where you introduce the characters and provide the audience with only the information necessary for them to understand what's going on in the story. You never want to give them too much information, especially not too soon. Basically, the exposition is just you establishing the setting and the world we're in and the characters we're watching or following, okay? Then comes the explanation part of it, where you basically lay out the beginnings of what's going to drive the plot forward, all right? Once you have the explanation done, the audience understands, okay, these are our characters. We know that from the exposition. This is where we are. Explanation, this is where the story is going to take us as we follow these characters through it. And then exploration is going to be the longest part of your story. Exploration is going to allow you to take those two ideas, the exposition and the explanation, and just run off with them and decide what's going to happen now. And that's where you really just create the bulk of the story. Bulk of the story is going to be exploration. And that's going to be the actual journey, them getting to Act 4, the climax, which is, most of us who have done an English class know what the climax is. It's the height of the story. It's the part with the most tension. It's the part with the highest stakes. So when you're writing the climax, you really have to think about where has the exploration of the exposition and explanation taken us? And from there, how do we deliver the final blow of this story so that we can start settling back down and really bring the audience back to the real world? That's what a story really is. It's an escape from reality for entertainment purposes. So you want to use the exposition and the exploration, or exposition and explanation, to really bring them into the universe. And then from there, the exploration, just, you want their mind to just sweep into the story and be enamored with it. Once they are into the story, you hit the climax, which is when, like, their heart should be racing, the reader in this case. The reader's heart should be racing. They should be ready to figure out what's going to happen next. And then you hit them with it, the climax, and then the ending just kind of sizzles everything down so that the reader can calmly escape from that world in a satisfactory way and come back to reality. This is where you would try to tie up any loose ends, make sure everything's all nice and pretty, and then everybody lives happily ever after, all that good stuff. Now we're going to work on this outline. We're going to break down all of these things based on what we've done. This is the last thing we're going to do in the outline stage. And from here, we're going to take our outline that we've created, move on to the actual writing of the story, and be able to come up with the first draft of the story. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on the outline. Hey guys, so I want to interject real quick with a quick clip. Most of what you're doing at this stage is going to be troubleshooting. As you start to figure out where you want the plot to go, you're going to realize you're going to need certain things to come into play. This is why we keep the beginning of the brainstorming session and the sentence session so vague, because you want to leave yourself the room to come up with solutions to writing problems. These problems are what affect you as a writer. Okay, so here I had that Perenna and Jeremy had been friends since childhood. And Perenna was the daughter of a cobbler, and her family moved to the castle at Prince Jeremy's request. So this is stuff we didn't know before when we were writing the character, but these are things that I just came up with having the vagueness at the beginning allowed me to do this at this point. So, the cobbler thing is going to be a small offhand comment. I have an idea for how I'm going to use it later in the story, but I'm writing it down now so I don't forget it. When you have ideas like that, I forget who the guy was, but it's the idea of like the gun hanging in the room in the first act, and then by act 2 somebody should have used the gun. Basically, whenever you mention something in a story, especially during the exposition stage, it should come into play later on in the story. So it's important that we as a writer are able to, when we have awesome hints of like inspiration like that, things that we want to bring up because we know that we can use them later in the story, we bring them up now early. So hopefully by the time the audience gets to that point, they've forgotten about it, but it's still in the back of their mind. So once we mention it again, they're like, oh yeah, that's right. And then we should be good. We're just being introduced to this character, Perenna, and we're learning that she's the daughter of a cobbler. So for us, it's a lot like, oh, well, okay, so now we know this about her. This is the first thing we're learning about her, and it's going to come up later in the story. And the first things you learn about a character are usually what you remember the most. The other thing I wanted to say is that, like, I basically need a party of some sort, some kind of big kingdom-wide thing that will allow us to, it'll allow us to kind of reference it. Maybe it'll be a big event that is mentioned a lot throughout the story, and maybe come the end of the story, that's where we end it off, is that event, because it, like an annual event that's mentioned often, I think eventually the audience is going to want to see what it's like. So that'll give us a chance at the end to tie everything up by having this amazing festival or whatever. So in fact, festival sounds great. I think what I'm going to go with is an autumn festival. A lot of cultures have a festival to celebrate a bountiful harvest, and I could see how that could actually play into a lot of the little plot points I have here. I'm going to be posting this story on my Wattpad, so I'm going to try not to give too many spoilers as to the actual story and the way it runs, but I will come in and interject with things like this whenever I feel like it's an important thing to tell you guys. So you want to leave your planning stage very vague, because later on in the story you might realize, oh, this is actually a really cool idea, but oh no, because I have all this detail already figured out, I can't really fit that in without it not making much sense. So keep it vague, keep it plain, and just when that way you leave room for inspiration to hit you. You know, you don't want to ever paint yourself into a corner that way. Okay, so I'm starting to record this again because I'm kind of at a part where I'm stuck a little bit. They've already been on their journey for a little while. They're about to come back to their camp. So as a writer, I'm stuck in this position where I don't really know how to tie up the loose ends in order to give them the ending that I want to. So I tried one alternative where they both went and tried to get Perenna's magic back via another method. And while that does lend itself to a nice epic fight scene at the end, I don't know if thematically it'll work, especially with Agatha being so anti-magic in the story. I don't know if she would be, I don't know how I would end up writing her character to where her helping Perenna get her magic back would make any sense. I don't really know where to go from here. I know that I have all my things brainstormed up at the top. I know that I have most of the outline pretty much done. I still don't know how I'm going to end up getting the ending that I want out of this story. It's just very complicated. Here's something I'll let you guys know. At any point, it's okay to take a little bit of a break, especially when you've done so much already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit pause on this. I'm going to take a little break. Maybe I'll come back in a few hours once I figured this out in my head, because, you know, I've already been working on this for almost 2 hours. So I'm at the point currently where I think my brain needs a little bit of a rest so I can try to develop more ideas and leave myself open to have inspiration. So I'm going to step away from this for a little bit. I'll come back and hopefully have this thing finished for you guys. And then I can talk to you about the last step of doing all this outline stuff. All right, everybody. So good news. I did manage to get over that hurdle that I was having at the beginning. It's actually the next day. I had to take some time to really step away from it. When I was able to come back, I was actually able to figure out a solution to the problem I was having. The last thing I did want to talk to you guys about was magic systems. Unfortunately, our story does have a magic system, which means we have to add an extra step to our planning process. So here I just have a brief outline of the magic system in this story and the rules of it. And this is just to have so that way when I am writing the story, I can keep all these rules in mind. Whenever I bring up magic, I just have to make sure that these rules are not going to interfere with what's going on. And if they are, I have to go back and rework the story. So far, just based on the outline, everything's working great. We're going to be good as far as the magic system not interfering with anything. Let's go over the rules of the magic system for this story. Magic is based on transferring energy. I think that's a very common rule for magic in most magic systems. Life energy is the most potent source of energy. So this means that in this universe, witches can sacrifice living beings, like animals or humans, in order to cast a more powerful spell. Love and hate are the only energies that cannot be siphoned, transferred, or destroyed using magic, meaning you can't cast a love spell or make a love potion in order to make somebody fall in love with you, because in that case, you would be transferring or siphoning love of some sort. So you're not allowed to do that in this universe. Those two emotions are the most powerful emotions, and as thus, they're immune to magic. So, however, love and hate can still be used as catalysts in spells and curses. So the fact that our protagonist has to receive a kiss from the person that hates them the most, that allows us to still have love and hate play a part in magic. So they can be used as a catalyst because they are so powerful. If you need a spell to be activated or deactivated a certain way, you can use love and hate as a way to activate the spell. Magic in this universe is adjacent to chemistry, and so it's called alchemy. So when people need to gather ingredients for a certain spell, they have to think about the properties of that ingredient as they pertain to magic. Just imagine like a periodic table full of magical elements like wormroot or witch hazel, or I don't know, whatever you would use for magic. And each of those things has a different effect. Like, I guess sage would be purification. That's how the magic system is working in this universe. Now, I only have 5 rules up here. You really want to keep the rules for your magic system to a minimum. You don't want to overcomplicate it. You want to give your characters enough leeway to be creative with the magic, but you also don't want them to be able to do just about anything. I'm happy with the magic system that I'm working with here. Truthfully, the whole point of this story is supposed to be that magic's bad, so our main characters aren't going to be using it too much, and it's not going to come up too often. But if you are writing a story in which there is a magic system, you're going to want to make sure that you have it on your outline documents, so that way as you're writing the story, you can look back to your outline documents and make sure you're not breaking any of your own rules. Okay, everybody, so with that, we actually are done with the outline. It was only 3 pages, 4 pages. It's not that much. It's not that hard. So as soon as you guys can get all this done, you can actually start writing your rough draft for your story. And in the next video, I'm going to go over writing a rough draft, some of the hurdles you might encounter, and how to turn this outline right here into a cohesive story with a plot and characters and something that your audience can really grasp onto. So I'll see you guys next time with that video. Until then, have a good day.